Hello, Math 1. Lesson 1.2, still talking about independent and dependent variables. And then we have a couple learning objectives that are mostly review. So the first learning objective is to identify independent and dependent variables in situations. That's the same learning objective from our first lesson. And the second and third lesson, which I mentioned are more review stuff, the second one is to plot x and y points on a coordinate plane and then to solve multi-step equations. So we'll cover all three of these things in the next four problems. So the first problem, we have a situation. Madison enjoys bicycling for exercise. Each Saturday she bikes a course she has mapped out around her town. She averages a speed of 12 miles per hour on her journey. And then we have a graph that shows her situation. So the directions were cut off, but the directions for this problem were to figure out what the independent and dependent variable are, and then to go ahead and actually put them on the x-axis or the y-axis, depending on whether or not they're independent or dependent. So remember from our first lesson that the independent variable is the x, dependent variable is the y. And remember, just a kind of helpful tip is that time is almost always usually independent. Alright, so in our situation, we have two units that stand out right away. Alright, we're talking about 12 miles per hour. Miles an hour. All right, those are units. Those are units of measure. Well, what does hour measure? It's a measurement of time. What do miles measure? Well, that's a measurement of distance. All right, so right away we have our two units right there. We have time that's being measured in hours and distance that's being measured in miles. Which of those is independent and which of those is dependent? Well, time is almost always independent. So we can actually say time, this is the independent one, which means our distance this is dependent. All right, so if time is independent, where does that go? X or y-axis? That goes on the x-axis because the independent variable represents the x variable. And on the y-axis, we have distance, and we are measuring distance in miles. All right, so just identifying what the independent and dependent are. Second one, Natasha's filling the bathtub with water in order to give her dog Buster a bath. We can see here it looks like the tub starts with 0 water, then it starts getting filled, till we have a lot more water. So the faucet fills the tub at an average rate of 12 gallons per minute. I underline gallons in minute because those are units, right? And that usually tells me what it is that we're talking about. What are the two quantities that we're talking about? Well, minutes, what does that measure? Time. Gallons, what does that measure? In this case, we're talking about water, right? Amount of water. Okay, so remembering that time is almost always independent, we can see that time, and specifically minutes, would go on the x-axis, whereas the amount of water would go on the y-axis, and we are measuring water in gallons. I put gallons in parentheses there. All right, that's it for the independent, dependent stuff. Plotting points, this again should be a review. we have 4 points here, W, X, Y, and Z. I'll start with W. We have 1, comma, -5. Remember that these are all ordered pairs where the first number represents your distance on the x-axis and the second number represents your distance on the y-axis. So the first one, 1, -5, means I go on the x-axis to 1. So here's 1. And then -5 means I go down 5 from there. So -5 on the y-axis. So here would be my points. 1, comma, -5. I moved to the right 1 and then went down -5. And this point we'll call W. Alright, take a second here and see if you can figure out where X is going to be. Try to point to it. Is it going to be in quadrant 1? Is it going to be in quadrant 2? Is it going to be over here in 3? Or is it going to be close to W in quadrant 4? Where do you think X is going to be? Where do you think Y is going to be? And where do you think Z is going to be? Okay, X would be down here. Y would be over here. And Z would be over here. All right. Solving equations. I really want to see what you guys know, what you remember from last year. So I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. Right away when we see an equation, I like putting a line down the middle. I think it helps separate one side of the equation from the other. And I think wherever you guys are right now, you've learned the distributive property. And you should know that most of the time whenever we see a number in front of the parentheses like that, we are going to distribute that number to both terms, or whatever number of terms there are inside of those parentheses. And distribution, remember, means multiplication. So this is -3 times 4, which gives me a product of -12x. -3 times -1. Negative times a negative is positive. 3 times 1 is 3. Alright, may have been a while since we've done equations, so if this stuff isn't clicking right away, it's one of those things we just got to practice, and then trust me, by the end of the year, these equations right here are going to be so easy to you. I promise. Alright, and then we want to get rid of the number that's not closest to the x. So right now, the 12 is with the x, so I'm going to want to get rid of this 3 first. So I can do that by doing the opposite to both sides. And that will leave me with a -12x equals. Now over here, please, if you need your calculator right now, that's absolutely fine. Use your calculator. I do want you guys to try to also do these mentally and use your calculator to check yourself. So -45 minus 3 is at -48. And now in this last step, because this -12 is right next to the x, it's stuck to the x, we have to divide it away from. And what that gives us, -48 divided by -12, +4. Alright, I'll go through this one a little quicker just so you can see. Split off both sides, distribute the 4. 4 times 2k is 8k. 4 times 3 is +12. Alright, leave the 8 alone for now. Let's try to get rid of the +12. Subtract 12 because that's the opposite. So we have 8k equals 44 minus 12, 32. Almost there. K is almost by itself. Divide 8. So our answer is also 4. Alright, that's it for today, guys. Don't worry about this one. The video is a little too long already. So, independent, dependent. Remember, the independent variable goes on the x-axis. The dependent variable goes on the y-axis. Plotting points and solving equations.